Welcome to this session. This session again we will be continuing with the Nyaya philosophy. The last classes we have discussed Nyaya epistemology and how Nyaya treats epistemology. Further, how Nyaya also consider knowledge under the epistemological perspective as well as metaphysical perspective. We said that knowledge according to Nyaya, it is anubhava, it is a presentational, and also it is representational, it is a smriti. Anubhava means we cognize an object which is presented before us, and representational smriti means there are many facts, events or objects we cognized in the past and we encountered the same object or the similar object at present. Therefore, the memory try to recapitulate all the information which was stored in the soul in the form of impression and try to relate to the objects which is presented before him or her. Therefore, they are saying that knowledge are of two types. One is representational, which is presented before us, and the representational means the knowledge which was already there, which was already experienced, now it has to be retrieved by the help of mind. After that, we said that all cognitions are not valid cognitions. That means there are many cognitions which are presentational in character but not valid. There also we have said that how doubt and error, and further we have argued that how tarka as a hypothetical argument comes under aprama. Aprama means invalid knowledge. We have also said that smriti are of two types, because many times we try to recapitulate some of the information in the exact way that we had experienced in the past, and there are many times, there are many situations where we could not able to retrieve all the information that we have experienced in the past. So, there are two types of memory. In the first case, it is true because the mind able to recapitulate all the information as it was experienced. Therefore, the knowledge over here is a true one or a valid one. However, if the mind could not able to retrieve all the information that was accumulated or gathered or experienced in the past, then the knowledge is not a valid one. Further, Nyaya also explained saying that why the knowledge of dream cannot be considered as a valid knowledge, though in few situations we could able to trace out some of the information which we had seen in the last night in the form of dream. So, now in a broad category, last time also I have shown you in the form of graph that how knowledge is divided and what is the Nyaya opinion on the term knowledge. This class particularly we will be discussing Prama and Pramana. Prama means valid knowledge. What are the conditions required for having a valid knowledge, or is it the case that valid knowledge automatically happens? What are the essential elements we require for having a valid knowledge? In addition to that, we will also discuss in this class that what is Pramana. We know roughly Pramana means the means through which we accumulate the valid knowledge, but is it the case or Nyaya has a different opinion? As you know that in many occasions we said according to Nyaya they have accepted 4 pramanas. One is perception or pratyakya, second one is inference or anumana, the third one is comparison or upamana, and the fourth, the last one is known as verbal testimony or sabda. Now we will be discussing what we mean by pramana and why Nyaya has given emphasis on pramana and what are the essential elements required to have a pramana. So, all these things comes together today's classes content. So, we will be discussing one after another in a logical, sequential, even argumentative way. Now, the first we will be saying what is Prama and Pramana. Knowledge in a broader form means true belief on an object carries the assurance of its truth. What Nyaya said is that whenever we have a knowledge, whenever we claim that we have a knowledge, it means that there is an object on which we have a knowledge. and in addition to that we know all the features of the object in the form which supports that object. That means we never identify some of the features of that object and later found that these are the features are not found with that object. That means the features that we identify for having a knowledge of an object, it conform to that object. Therefore, they said that whenever we identify object, we identify in its true nature. Therefore, knowledge for them is nothing but tautology. Tautology in symbolic logic, you find it means that all the cases, if a proposition is true, you said that this is tautology. That means it has only options, true only. So, in the same way, Nyaya said that knowledge means you have a valid knowledge. You have valid knowledge means you identify that object, and further also you could be able to explain all the features of that object which is conform to that object. If these are the things will be available with you, then you can able to cognize the object, and you can henceforth claim that you have a knowledge of an object. And once you have a knowledge of that object, you can say it is a prama or a valid knowledge. And the means through which you identify or cognize that object, the means is nothing but pramana. Is the source for cognizing prama is nothing but pramana. Further, they said a knowledge or cognition is to be valid when it is satisfied the three conditions. As I promised that we will be discussing prama, Nyaya here clearly said that to have a prama, it should satisfy three conditions. What are the three conditions? In a Sanskrit shloka, they put it asamdigdha yathartha anubhava. I repeat, what are the three conditions according to Nyaya philosophy to have a valid knowledge are those asamdigdha, yathartha and anubhava. Asamdigdha is the first condition, second condition is yathartha, and the third one is anubhava. That means once you have asamdigdha, yathartha and anubhava, the knowledge that you gain on a particular object, you can claim valid knowledge. Now let us discuss what is meant by asamdigdha. Asamdigdha means decisable cognition, the cognition you decide. Whenever you identify an object, you give a name to that object. That means you identify or cognize an object with a particular name, and this implies that you know how the object is different from other objects, is different from other phenomena, or is different from other features of that object. Once you identify an object with a particular name, your identification is correct if all the features that you identify or all the features through which you identify that object, if these are the features found with that object. Therefore, Nyaya claims that there are three conditions involved to cognize an object, and henceforth your knowledge will be valid or prama. The first one is asamdigdha. Anything that you cognize, it should be a decisable cognition. You cognize with a particular name. Then it is a truthfulness. Yathartha means truthfulness. That means all the features through which you identify that object, the object should conform with these features. At any such cases, this kind of situation should not arise. For example, you cognize that object with some features and later you find that that features is not available with that object. If this is the case, then your knowledge won't be valid. So therefore, they are saying that yathartha is a condition, truthfulness should be fulfilled for cognizing an object. The last one they said anubhava. Anubhava means presentational in character. Anything that you cognize, it should be presented. Anything you cognize, it should be in presentational nature. That means the object should be presented before you. If these are the things you find, then your knowledge on that particular object will be a valid one. What are the conditions? I repeat, first is asamdigdha, means a decisable cognition. The second one is yathartha, that means truthfulness about that object, and the third one is a presentational in nature. That means whenever you cognize an object, the object should be presented before you. With these three conditions, Nyaya rejects doubt, error, tarka and also smriti as a valid knowledge, because in case of smriti it is a representational in character. So, since they have not recommended that knowledge can be a representational character, therefore, in this ground smriti can be rejected. Now, this doubt or samsaya, error or viparjaya and tarka or hypothetical reasoning or arguments will be valid because there will be no decisible cognition in these other cases. Therefore, by considering these three conditions, Nyaya rejects knowledge which are not valid. These are doubt, error, tarka and smriti. Now, we will be elaborating further. You can read my slides. I have written here, memory is excluded because it is not presentational in character. Further, I said that other three means doubt, error and tarka are excluded from the valid knowledge because they are neither true nor definite and not even assured in their character. Henceforth, any knowledge to be valid, it should be satisfy three conditions. One is asamdigdha, yathartha and anubhava. Asamdigdha means an assured cognition. It is distinguished from problematic and hypothetical knowledge. What it means? There are many knowledge is problematic. For example, mathematical knowledge. For example, you have an intuition for a particular object. However, you never find all your intuition is correct for that object. It is called problematic knowledge. Hypothetical knowledge, that means if then condition involved, if x then y, and there are many times you do not find x, however you find y. Therefore, they are saying that the problematic knowledge and hypothetical knowledge cannot be a valid knowledge, because in these cases you do not find any kind of cognition which is a deciding, that means any decidable cognition or the cognition with a particular name you will not find. If at all you are finding, in later period you find that the features through which you are finding, all the features are not conforming to that object. Therefore, in asamdigdha they clearly said that the valid knowledge is distinguished from problematic and hypothetical knowledge. It is based on your firm belief, but all firm belief are not prama. For example, bhrama or illusion. In case of illusion, you can also identify an object with a particular name. However, in later period you find that whatever name through which you identify that object, it is not the same object. The example I had given in the last class, if you remember, I said in the hot summer you find mirage from a long distance, you find it looks like a water, but however the mirage is not same as water. Therefore, it is because of your illusion or bhrama you concluded that you cognize the object, say water, which find in a distance from you, but when you comes closer to that object you find it is a mirage. In this way, in case of bhrama, though we can identify an object with a particular name, however that is not a valid knowledge. The last point I have said, prama implies something more than the subjective certainty. That means if you consider only asamdigdha as a condition, you find that it is not only one individual cognizing a particular object having a particular name, it is more than one individual cognizing a particular object having a particular name. That means whenever I am cognizing that this is a duster, that means it is not me only, other people cannot vary on my cognition of that object. Other people also equally say that this is duster, because we commonly share a fact that this object having so and so features, as a result this object's name is known as duster. In this case they said that asamdigdha, while cognizing an object with a particular name, you should not be confined with your subjective knowledge. Rather, the cognition always leads to either intersubjectivity or objective knowledge. That means more than one people cognize that same object with the same name, then only your cognition will be a valid one. Now, moving towards the second condition, that is yathartha. In case of yathartha, you find that truthfulness is a criterion which opposes to error, mistake or wrong. The knowledge is true when it is not contradicted by its object. What they mean is that whenever you identify an object, you identify a particular object because of its features, because of its characteristics, whether accidental characteristics or essential characteristics. However, it is because of the characteristics you cognize an object with a particular name, or you identify an object. What they are saying that it is the features through which you cognize an object, and the features through which you cognize the object, it should conform to the object, then only your knowledge will be valid. But in any other cases, your knowledge cannot be considered as valid. So this is a condition known as truthfulness or yathartha. Further, they said to know a thing is true when we know its characteristics, which is characterized to that object. Thus, Nyaya said that the truth of knowledge consists in its corresponds to facts. That means that any moment we cognize an object, the object or fact you find in the empirical world. Therefore, Nayakas are realist, because whatever they are talking, all their discussions you find it relates to the phenomenal world, or the objects, facts or events, those are found in the phenomenal world. The last condition is known as anubhava, which is presentational in character. That means while identifying an object, it is not the case that you identify an object with a particular name and also you identify an object with certain features. The conditions are not limited to that. They are saying that to do all these things also, the object should be presented before you, the object should be available before you. That is meant by anubhava. The object is a presentational in character. It cannot be a representational in character. It is presentational in character because it is grounded in the object. You see the object, infer the object, anything you do, the object will be presented before you. And with these three conditions, you can say that any knowledge you have on a particular object is a valid knowledge, or known as Pramana. Now we will be discussing Pramana. What is Pramana? And how Nyaya has given emphasis on the term Pramana. The four elements are necessary for a knowledge is to be valid. They are saying that to have any kind of knowledge, we need four components or four elements. The first one is cognizer. Cognizer means the subject who will be cognizing the object. And you know that cognizer in one hand is a subject has to cognize an object, and on the another hand there is an object which has to be cognized. Apart from this, you find there is an instrument, there is a means to cognize that object. That means cognizer, then object, then you have an instrument for cognizing that object, and after that you have a cognition to that object. There are four elements therefore required to have a cognition on a particular object or a valid knowledge. I repeat, in a valid knowledge we need four elements as an indispensable elements to have Pramana. These are cognizer as a subject, object which is to be cognized, and the instrument through which the object is to be cognized, and the four after this the cognizer have the cognition, that means the knowledge, accumulated knowledge. So these are the four elements barely required or essentially required to have a Pramana or valid knowledge. They said that Prama Karanam Pramanam, what it means to have valid knowledge, we need the means through which we can accumulate the valid knowledge. Therefore, Prama, in the left side you can see Prama, it means valid knowledge. Karanam means it is the means or the path through which we accumulate prama, and the path is nothing but pramana. Therefore, they are saying that prama, karanam, pramanam. The term karanam means the instrument or the chief cause of prama. As you know, pramana means the source of valid knowledge. It provides the valid knowledge about objects. The quote and unquote you find in Nyaya's text that pramana defines as the cause of valid cognition of objects in as much as it gives us a knowledge of objects as they really are and exist in themselves. The same way they are repeating, they are saying that whenever you cognize an object with its features, make sure that all the features should find in that object, then only your cognition will be a valid one. But in any other cases, your cognition cannot be considered as a valid one. The last point I say, pramana and prama are invariably related with each other. If you find that to have a valid cognition, we need the correct means to accumulate the valid knowledge, and the correct means is nothing but pramana. And according to Nyaya philosophy, there are 4 pramanas. One is perception, inference, comparison and testimony. In this sense, Nyaya submits that prama and pramana both are closely connected with each other. To have a prama means we need pramana, and pramana is required for having prama. Continuing further, they said that by the help of pramana, the cognizer possesses the right knowledge about the object. Therefore, pramana means karana, to acquire prama. That means pramana is the means to achieve or attain the valid knowledge known as prama. Now the difference we will make so that you can understand clearly what is meant by karana and what is meant by karana. So there are 2 things, do not be confused. We said that prama, karana, pramanam. That means the means through which we cognize an object. The pramana is a means through which we cognize an object. So here karana is a means, but karana implies cause. Karana implies cause, whereas karana is understood as a means or the media. So there should not be any confusion between these 2 terms. What Nyaya is explaining about cause is that cause is an invariable, unconditional and antecedent of the effect, whereas the effect is an unconditional, invariable and consequent of the cause. You find in both the cases cause and effect. In case of cause also you find invariable and unconditional. In case of effect also you find invariable and unconditional, the 2 terms. However, you find that in case of cause it is invariable, unconditional, antecedent of the effect, and in case of effect you find that invariable, unconditional, in addition to that consequence of the cause. So therefore, you find there is a close association relation between cause and effect. If there is a effect, there must have a cause. If there is a cause, and it leads to an effect. So in this way, prama and pramana are closely connected or related with each other. They are saying that understood the same spirit, how cause and effect are related, in the same way prama and pramana both are related with each other. To have a prama, we need pramana, and pramana helps to accumulate a valid knowledge which is known as prama. Now you know what is cause and what is effect. Now we will be knowing there are 3 kinds of causes and how Nyaya explain these 3 causes. The first, they said that causes are of 3 kinds. The first one is samavai or constituent cause. The second one is asamavai, it is a non-constituent cause, and the third one is nimitta or efficient cause. In case of first one, what they said is the material cause. Samavai is nothing but a material cause, a constituent cause. Without that, no effect can be produced. If you say cloth is an effect, then its material cause is thread. So thread here is a samavai or the material cause. Then what is non-constituent cause or asambai? He is saying that when these two threads comes together and there is a color on that, you find each cloth have a color as well as thread, and the combinations of color and thread is nothing but asambai or non-constituent cause. That means, though these are not directly involved to produce an effect, however, their association with this material cause is really important for producing an effect. Their association contributes significantly for producing an effect. The last one is nimitta karana. Nimitta means it is the instrument cause. A human being also involved in nimitta, and the power of machine and the electricity and the process of making some effect, all these things to be considered as nimitta or karana. Now we will be elaborated further. Samavai or constituent, it is the material cause or inherent cause which is the substratum in which the effect inheres. That means, any part of the world, if you see there is a effect, that means it implies there is a cause. That means, in all the cases effect exists in its material cause prior to its production. So, therefore, material cause is its cause where the effect exists prior to its production. If you say cord is the effect, then cord existed in the material cause milk prior to its production. If you say cloth is the effect, then cloth existed in the thread prior to its production. So, here thread is the material cause, whereas the cloth is the effect. So, the term inherence is to be remembered or to be understood here. Further, they said it is the material cause, the constituent or samavai is the material cause or inherent cause, which is the substratum in which the effect inheres. For example, thread of a cloth. Now, what is asamavai? How Nyaya philosophy describes asamavai or non-constituent cause? Now we will see. It is known as non-inherent cause. That means, asamavai is a cause it never find in the matters or in the material cause, but somehow associated with the cause. He is saying that though it is not found in the material cause, but it associates with that material cause, it helps to produce the effect. It determines the effect when it stands as an inherent attribute of the constituent cause. For example, contact of the threads, contact between threads and color, all this can be considered as non-constituent cause. They said that the non-constituent cause cannot be treated as a material cause. However, their association towards the material cause, it helps to produce the effect. And the third one, they said that in case of nimitta or efficient cause, how it really helps to produce an effect. He is saying that nimitta or efficient cause, it is neither the constituent nor the non-constituent cause of an effect. In case of nimitta, he is saying that nimitta is a cause, it is neither constituent nor non-constituent, neither samavai nor asamavai. In this case, the human being, the intellect of the human being involved, because we need an instrument to produce an effect from the matters or material cause. The material cause never automatically produces anything or any effect. If anything is produced from the material cause, it is someone who designed it and what effect to be produced. Take an example, say pot. Pot is made of clay. So, here clay is the material cause and pot is the effect. Question arises, can clay automatically produce the pot? We agree to say that it cannot be so, because it is some human being with his or her instruments produces pot from the clay. Therefore, we find that there is an indispensable element involved in the form of cause for producing an effect from the material cause. However, though there is association between cause and effect, still we find an instrument, we find a human being, we find some kind of necessary instrument to produce the effect from the cause. So, these are the cases, it is nothing but karana or the chip. The way they said that nimitta or the efficient cause is not a passive substratum in which the effect inheres, because the effect which is produced, it never inheres in the efficient cause, it only inheres in the material cause, it never inheres in the non-constituent cause. Therefore, the nimitta karana is in between responsible for producing an effect from the material. He is saying that it is an agency to be understood, agency that acts on both constituent as well as non-constituent causes and makes them produce the effect. For example, if the effect is cloth, then the loom is the efficient cause. What is the word loom means? Nyaya explains here, the word loom means machine, electricity, the power of machine, the process of making, etc., etc. The human intellect involved can be also considered as a nimitta or the efficient cause, because altogether this, the power of machine, power of electricity, and also the process of making, all this together helps to produce an effect from the material cause. So, therefore, it is called as nimitta, nimitta karana or nimitta cause. Thus, the efficient cause is regarded as karana, which plays the vital role in case of producing the effect, because so far what we have known is that there are three types of causes. One is samabhayi, asamabhayi, and nimitta, and nimitta is an instrument cause or efficient cause which helps to produce effect from the matter, and no such causes can do that. The material cause cannot automatically produce the effect, neither non-constituent cause or asamabhayi cause is responsible for producing an effect from the material cause automatically. Therefore, he is saying that it is a nimitta, is to be understood as karana, that how that nimitta has become so indispensable for producing an effect from the cause. In the same way, pramana is indispensable for producing a valid knowledge known as prama, or say pramana is a karana or efficient cause which is responsible to produce a valid knowledge known as prama. Now, the example they have given, just to consider the spirit, how they mean when they said this in nimitta cause, what they mean, what they have understood when they explain the term nimitta or efficient cause. In the same way, you try to understand that pramana is a karana, but not karana. Pramana is a karana, which is an efficient cause, you say, is a karana through which we can accumulate or gain the valid knowledge known as prama. Now, moving further, the first two are general causes or rather conditions of the effect, whereas the last one is actually the operative cause. Without efficient cause, the effect is not possible. That means, if there is no instrument, there is no human being involved, the no power, no electricity involved, no machine involved, can the cause automatically produce the effect? It is not possible. Therefore, they are saying that without efficient cause, the effect is not possible. In this regard, pramana is the unique operative cause or karana of valid knowledge. Now, we will see factors of prama. What are the factors of prama? That means, whenever we have a valid knowledge, what are the factors are responsible to help or to get the valid knowledge. Whenever we have a valid knowledge, or we can, whenever we claim that we have a knowledge on a particular object, what are the factors responsible to accumulate that knowledge of an object? The first one is, they said, pramata is a subject. The second one is prameya as an object. The third one is pramana or the method of valid knowledge. When they said that it is subject, they have given the emphasis. Any knowledge we have in this world, it is the subject who accumulates that knowledge. The object like chair, table, pen, duster, etc. cannot accumulate the knowledge. So, therefore, it is the subject or the cognizer will be cognizing that object, and henceforth the knowledge will be retained in the cognizer's soul. Therefore, any knowledge we require or anything we consider as a knowledge, it is inherent in the cognizer who has cognized that object. So, the subject is the basic requirement for have a cognition. In addition to that, they said that Pramana is an object. When they said object, you should understand also both existent and non-existent objects. Existent objects like chair, pen, bicycle, all these things which is available in this phenomenal world, which you can see. What is non-existent objects? If I say milk sea, you know milk, you know also sea. Now you can imagine a picture in a form and refers to the worldly affairs. It is said that this is called non-existent of objects. If I said that golden mountain, now you know what is gold and you know what is mountain. Now you can frame a picture of what is golden mountain and try to relate to the phenomenal world or try to correspond to the phenomenal world. Then you say that this is non-existent objects. Further, they said that there are positive facts and negative facts. All these things deals with the objects. What is positive facts? The facts, those are found in the phenomenal world. Those can be referred in the phenomenal world or empirical world. What is the negative facts? Negative facts means you try to conceptualize some of the situation in the form of impression, though it is not found in the particular situation. For example, if I say there is no elephant in a classroom, you understood this concept because you know that if there is an elephant in the classroom, how the situation should be and how it appears. But in the absence of elephant also, you can imagine a situation of there is an elephant in the classroom. What is saying that though the elephant does not exist in the classroom, still you can have a imagination, you can have a picture in your mind, and the picture can be referred to the empirical world. It is called negative facts. So therefore, whenever I say that any knowledge we have, it refers to object. Please understood, object means both existent and non-existent objects, which includes positive facts as well as negative facts. So in a very broader frame, they said that knowledge means it refers to an object, and any knowledge we have, that means we have a knowledge about that objects. The last one they said, it's need Pramana. The cognizer in one hand and the object in another hand is not enough to have a knowledge about that object. We need a Pramana, that means there is a means or a media through which to cognize an object. If we can do so, then the knowledge will be known as a valid one. Further, they said, why we require all this? We require all this because whenever we have a knowledge, we are not necessarily referring to the objects those are found in the phenomenal world. What we are referring, also there are many situations, it is a concept, it is an idea, and here Nyaya said that also the ideas and concept can be referred to an object. The knowledge of an idea, the knowledge of an object, the knowledge of a concept can be referred to an object. For example, if I say again golden mountain, this is an idea, this is a concept, it refers to an object. In this way, we have to understand the concept they have discussed as why we treat in the way that whenever we have a knowledge, knowledge refers to the objects of the world. And therefore, they submits that we need three essential factors for cognizing an object to have a valid knowledge or Pramana. One is subject, another is object, and the third one is Pramana. So without these three, we cannot able to accumulate any valid knowledge. Now we will be discussing the theory of validity or Pramanyavada. As you know that Pramanyavada, Pramana means the means of accumulating or achieving a valid knowledge, and valid knowledge is known as Pramana. Now Pramanyavada means a theory of validity. That means whenever we cognize an object, we cognize because of some other factors responsible. Factors means intrinsic factor as well as extrinsic factors. Extrinsic factors means there is a light, minimum distance, etc., etc. And the object is not hiding, it is presented before us. And intrinsic means all our memory should function well. We are not caught with jaundice disease. We are in a healthy climate conditions. We are healthy and also we are behave like an ordinary human being. We are equally fit to cognize an object. So therefore, they are saying that whenever there is a cognition, it deals with both internal condition as well as external condition. What Nyaya cause intrinsic means that the effect exists in its material cause prior to its production, and what extrinsic means the effect after production is different from the cause. There are two types of concept here. Further, they said that the knowledge is valid or invalid. Sometimes it depends on the conditional situation, sometimes it depends on the external condition, sometimes it depends on the internal conditions. Because there are many situations, since a person is affected with the jaundice disease, everything appears to him or her is yellow. However, the nature of that object is not yellow. The attribute yellowness may not be found into that object, and henceforth the knowledge he or she has to that particular object and with a particular name cannot be considered as a valid knowledge. In the same way, there are many kind of external conditions matters when we cognize an object. If it is a dark room, a human being, though he is a normal human being, cannot see anything in that dark room. So whatever knowledge he have in that room on a particular object, that may not be valid knowledge, because we need a sufficient light to cognize that object, and also we need a minimum distance to cognize that object. If an object is placed in a long distance, we cannot claim that object with a particular name, because we need a particular distance to cognize an object, and we cognize all its feature, which also needs to be conformed to that object. Therefore, they said that the validity and invalidity depends on the internal and external conditions also. There are two types of Pramanyavada. One is Sattva Pramanyavada, another is Paratva Pramanyavada. What is Sattva Pramanyavada means? The knowledge will be valid or invalid depends on its internal conditions or intrinsic factors. What is Paratva Pramanyavada? Paratva Pramanyavada means the knowledge which is the valid or invalid depends on the external conditions. If the external conditions is good, then the knowledge will be valid, though some other parameters has to be there. The subject, object, the instrument and the means of cognizing that object. Apart from all these, we have say internal and external conditions required. So there are two types of Pramanyavada that you can see. One is Sattva Pramanyavada, another is Paratva Pramanyavada. And different schools have their different opinion on these two Pramanyavada. And there are many times people claim that the knowledge will be invalid. It may be depends on again intrinsic factor as well as extrinsic factor. The invalid knowledge is known as Apramanya. The invalid knowledge is known as Apramanyavada, whereas valid knowledge is called Pramanyavada, because valid knowledge Pramana, and the means through which we get the valid knowledge is Pramana. Therefore, they are saying that any knowledge we have called Pramanyavada. Through particular means, through particular Pramana, we gain a knowledge known as Pramana. So here you find there are four kinds of knowledge Nayakas are talking about. One is Sattva Pramanyavada, another is Sattva Apramanyavada, the third one is Paratva Pramanyavada, and the fourth one is Paratva Pramanyavada. What is Sattva Pramanyavada means? The validity of the knowledge is depend on internal conditions or intrinsic conditions. Sattva Apramanyavada means the invalidity of a knowledge depends on the internal conditions or intrinsic nature. The third one, Paratva Pramanyavada, that means a knowledge is valid depends on the external conditions. And the fourth one is Paratva Apramanyavada. What it means? The knowledge is invalid, depends on the external conditions. Now we will see what are the schools, what are the system prescribe how knowledge can be valid and how knowledge can be decided, whether based on internal or external conditions, whether the validity knowledge can be intrinsic or extrinsic, and what are the systems opinion we will discuss. Here I will just read it for your help. This theory means Pramanyavada. This theory expresses about when the knowledge will be true and when it will be false. Swata Pramanyavada, it is constituted and determined by intrinsic condition, it is self-evident. It is intrinsic because the effect is found in the cause. Paratta Pramanyavada, on the other hand, it is constituted and ascertained by extrinsic conditions. It is extrinsic because the effect is different from cause. The effect is a new phenomenon which is not found in the cause. So now you can know what is intrinsic and extrinsic according to Nyaya philosophy and how they mean when they speaks about Pramanyavada. Basically their aim is to identify the knowledge we have, whether the knowledge is valid or invalid. If at all valid, under which condition it is valid. If it is invalid, why it is invalid, and under which conditions it is invalid. Now let us discuss schools' opinion. Different systems have given their own opinion to considering whether knowledge will be valid or invalid, depends on whether intrinsic or extrinsic factors. Now schools' opinion, if you can see that, the Nyaya is a realist philosopher. They said that Paratta Pramanyavada. What they mean is that the knowledge is valid or invalid, depends on the extrinsic factor. Validity and invalidity of knowledge are extrinsic. Counteracting to this view, Sankhya philosophy or Sankhya system claim that Sattva Pramanyavada, that means the validity and invalidity of knowledge are intrinsic. Here Sattva stands for intrinsic and Pramanyavada is valid or invalid knowledge. Buddhism has given two views on Pramanyavada. First they say that Sattva Apramanyavada, that means a knowledge will be invalid which depends on its intrinsic nature. A knowledge is to be invalid which depends on the intrinsic nature. And Paratta Pramanyavada means a knowledge is to be valid, depends on its extrinsic factors or extrinsic in nature. Therefore, Buddhism has two opinions. Well, the knowledge will be invalid, depends on intrinsic factors, and the knowledge will be valid, it depends on external factors. The fourth schools, Vedantins as well as Mimamskas, combinedly, they argued that Sattva Pramanyavada and Paratta Apramanyavada, that means a knowledge will be valid when it is supported by the internal conditions or intrinsic conditions, and a knowledge will be invalid when it is supported by the extrinsic conditions. So all these things, features, you must know, and henceforth you can have a comprehensive knowledge about Nyaya, Prama and Pramana. I hope this session will be helpful for you to understand what is Prama and what is Pramana. The next session we will be discussing perception. What are the types of perception? According to Nyaya, perception are of two types. One is ordinary, another is extraordinary, which we will be discussing in the next classes. Thank you.